Tracy, Mrs. JDog Flanagan with you here today, and I would like to welcome you to this episode of Tactical Treasures. Tactical Treasures podcast is a podcast where I speak to veterans and military family members in the veteran space where they share with me a specific object or piece of advice that has helped them throughout their journey in their military career, business, or life. Today we have a very special guest, Carol Eggert. Carol is the Senior Vice President of Military and Veteran Affairs at Comcast NBC Universal and a retired Army Brigadier General. During her military career, she served in a variety of command and staff positions and completed numerous overseas deployments, including a 15-month combat tour in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom as Chief of the Women's Initiatives Division and Senior Liaison to the U.S. Embassy Baghdad, where she conducted a full-scale analysis of women's initiatives and developed a strategic plan for the economic and political empowerment of Iraqi women under the U.S. Secretary of State. She is the recipient of numerous awards and commendations in recognition of her contributions to the military, including the Legion of Merit, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, and the multiple awards of the Meritorious Service Medal. Carol, what an amazing decorated military career. Thank you so much for your service, ma'am. Congratulations to you.
Tracy, I think this idea that you have of tactical treasures is so clever and so needed. When I heard about it and sent me a note, I thought this is the coolest thing ever. I've listened to several of the podcasts, and so hats off to you for coming up with a very innovative way to bring military stories to the community, things that we so often don't hear. And so excellent job. I'm looking forward to talking with you. One thing I will add, when it comes to my biography, when you've been in over 30 years, it's pretty hard to get it all in there. But I will say that I started as an enlisted soldier, as a private, and up to E6 staff sergeant, before I went to officer candidate school. And so I think that gives a perspective to the story I'm about to tell you. I spent a lot of times with our troops, and I value that time, and I think that makes us gives us a different perspective as officers.
I can see how that totally works in the military, sort of starting from the ground up, because I think it's the same thing in business as well and in your career. If you can start from the ground up and work your way up, you really tend to understand, the people who are in service underneath of you. So yes. Excellent point. So I would love to hear, you're doing great things, I think, at NBC Comcast, and I would love to hear about what you're doing there and the initiatives that you've started.
Thanks for asking that question. I started at Comcast after I retired from the military at the end of 2015. And new position, I was asked if I could help build a strategy for military engagement across the large Comcast enterprise. And we're talking NBC Universal, the parks in LA, the parks in Orlando, the studios in New York. So that's a big thing to, bite off. And it was just me. But hats off to Comcast to see the need that if we're going to best relate to the military community, it helps to have someone who was in it. So we now have a team of about to be 11 folks, all with a military background, to include military spouse, military caregiver, those who have served, currently serving in the Guard and Reserve, and then a military family member. So we certainly understand our military community, and I think that makes us a really strong team. And it is to advise on how do we best engage with the military community, everything from hiring. And I know, Tracy, that it's not easy to transition out of the military into the private sector. And so you have to help on both sides, the transitioning service member, as well as our recruiters, our hiring managers, our supervisors, our leadership, to explain what is this very unique military talent when it comes to hiring. And then when it comes to supporting the military community, how do we do that? There's hundreds and hundreds of military nonprofits. And how do you best, with your foundation, support those? How do you create the partnerships you need to make a stronger military community. An example with this focus on DE&I lately is we supported the Women's Memorial at Arlington to support a Women of Color in the Military exhibit. It's now a traveling exhibit, but just understanding that women of color in the military have a different story, and we need to bring these stories out. We work with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation to hire caregivers, to hire wounded warriors, to understand some of their challenges. So those are the types of things that we do. We've hired over 17,000 from the military talent pool. And I say that because so often people say veterans, but one thing is you have to understand to expand that pool. It really means veterans, those who have served, currently serving Guard and reservists, military spouses, and then military family members. This is a very unique group. So we're doing great stuff. I love it. I'll give you one other example. And we'll send you our year in review, Tracy, just so you get an idea. But lately, regarding the Olympics, we were able to work with AAFES, and we are streaming complete Olympics coverage, much more than you would get through your TV settings, to the military community through a partnership with AAFES, because we understand that the military community may not always be at the place they need to be to see something on TV, or they might want to see a very unusual event. So I'm so excited that we were able to partner with NBC Universal and AAFES to bring that coverage to our military community.
Well, that's you're doing really good work as far as forging that disconnect between the private sector and the military veteran and the veteran community, and that at JDog, that's been kind of our struggle as well, being able to embrace our veterans, because our JDogs love to hire their fellow brothers and sisters, and that I think is been a very important part of our JDogs and their business ownership, and just being able to embrace and understand their fellow service men and women. And I think that's a great need out there. I think in the private sector is having that liaison who understands the military, who's been in the military, who has served, that can help the company and HR understand the incredible talent that and skills that service members, women and men, bring to the private sector. It's just unbelievable.
Tracy, I think I'm just so proud of JDog. I was involved with you folks back when you were at St. Joe's and building that company. What a great idea! Certainly, as we have all the aging boomers that are downsizing and cleaning out, it's just great to have the services that you bring. And you're right. I would say one of my personal goals is to always work on lessening the civ-mil divide. And I will tell you that it's not a divide born out of malice. It's just a lack of knowledge and understanding. Everybody will say we love the military, but that's not the same as we understand the military, and that because of that understanding, we can work together. So I think it's really important. And what you're doing here, I think, lessens that just a little bit, brings another color to that story.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I, as a civilian myself, I can say that, JDog has made me and forced me to understand the military and the way I feel about it now is I think that civilians, it is it's our duty and our obligation to not only say, oh, I'm a patriot, I support the military, but we need to put our money where our mouth is, so to speak, and we need to learn. And, I've made it a point myself to learn, to understand the MOSs, to understand what PCS means, to understand, and now being the assistant director of our foundation, we're in the, understanding PTSD and mental health issues and focusing on combating veteran suicide. And so, I think there should be more of that out there, because once a person goes into the military, they come out and they're forever changed. They're a totally different person.
Very, very transformative experience. And what I think so many people don't understand in a very positive way. There's an awful lot of myths out there that we come out broken, and we all have to do what we can to counter that myth.
Mm.
One thing we've done, and I'd like to share it with your audience, Tracy, is that we created a partnership with PsychArmor, psycharmor.org, and we created content, think of it as a school of no-cost content on understanding the military and how to best support engaging with the military. A simple course, and I call them courses, but it's really web content. A simple one is 15 things every veteran wants you to know. Understanding the military culture, how to build a military spouse program, how to build a employee resource group for your veteran employees. So I saw the need out there, so I partnered with PsychArmor. And then another one, when it comes to the HR community and the hiring communities, we partnered with SHRM, and Tracy, I don't know if you know who they are, but Society for Human Resource Management. That's where you can get your continuing ed credits for your certifications. And we created with them a program, Veterans at Work Certificate for HR professionals, hiring managers. And it's just that, how to conduct a interview with military talent. Once again, understanding where to recruit and where should your talent acquisition programs be focused. Understanding military spouses. You know, you're never going to hire a mil spouse if you look at their resume and see that they moved every 2 or 3 years. You'll drop that resume right away because you'll think this person can't hold a job. Right. And you'd be surprised at the number of people that don't understand that a military spouse moves all the time with their active duty spouse. And even if they're no longer in the military, their employment history will still show that. So there's a lot of education required to lessen this divide specifically. So please have your folks check out SHRM, Veterans at Work Certificate, and then PsychArmor Employers Program.
I've actually gone through the content on PsychArmor.
Great.
So I'm very familiar with that. That was very helpful to me in the beginning. Great content there, I think. For the
Thank you for doing
society.
that. I'm thrilled that you did. And we have to tell your audience, we just said 15 things every veteran wants you to know. What do you think the number one thing is, Tracy? And rather than put you on the spot, I'll tell you, because since I served in the Army, the number one thing every veteran wants you to know is that we are not all soldiers.
Correct.
You know, right. Civilian community doesn't realize there's airmen, there's coasties, there's Marines. Don't ever call a Marine a soldier, as you know.
They get very upset about that, by the way. We have 3 Marines in our office.
Yes, so there you go. We are not all soldiers, understanding there are other components. Although I will say the Army is the largest.
Okay, Carol, so we could talk about HR stuff and all day. But let's dive into your treasure. I'm really excited to hear about it.
Well, it's a little unusual, Tracy, but it has a bit of a history. So when my husband and I went out on our first date, and we're talking 1979, 76, somewhere back there, we were on a bike ride. And on that ride, as we were riding alongside the road, I saw this little doll that had been dropped. And I picked it up and thought, this little thing needs a home. And we actually continued that tradition as our children grew, as we got married and had children. We would pick up what we called road orphans. So you often find little toys, little, plastic items. Think of it as a superhero or a Lego piece. And we would collect them and call them road orphans. And they would actually decorate the front of our van dash, as we went on family trips and our children grew. And I actually asked the kids this morning, I said, hey guys, I'm going to do a podcast about our road orphans. Do you remember? And my daughter actually wrote to me and said that they meant a lot to her. She always thought of them as, abandoned toys, and that they were going to have a second life with us, a second home. And so that made her feel good about finding them. And my other daughter said it often happened when we were on vacation. So each one on the dash brought back memories of great times, and they were always looking out for them as we were taking a hike or at a campground or at a, think of it as a national park or at a monument. And so my son said, I always thought of it as a family, like a souvenir, that it reminded them of our family trips, something someone else discarded and that we picked up and had new meaning for us in our family history. So I think it's kind of funny to talk about road orphans, but by the time my children grew up, we had a whole dash full of them. Now we have since sold that van, but we actually saved all the road orphans. But that leads me to my tactical treasure, and I'm a little embarrassed to tell you about it, but it's about this bear. If you can see this
I
bear,
can. Oh, look at
and
him or
isn't
her.
he
No, him.
cute?
Oh, it's a
Him.
he.
So he's a him.
Very
And
decorated, I could
very
see.
decorated, but it didn't start out that way. My sister, everybody in my family, I have 7 brothers and sisters, knew that we collected road orphans because, of course, they were all over our van dash. And she actually, with her family, saw this alongside of the road in the rain, all smashed up, soaking wet, and thought, this is the ultimate road orphan. They turned around, went back and got it, gave it a bath, washed it up, bought a uniform for it, and then as I was leaving for Iraq, they presented it to me. But before they did, a funny story is they were preparing to come to our departure event, and they set the package down and ran over this poor little bear. So
Oh,
his eyes are
no.
actually quite quite. So we figured, if he can live through that, he can come with me to Iraq. And that's
Oh,
exactly what I did. I took Axel to Iraq with me. I have to kind of wonder, like, what's a colonel doing with a stuffed bear in her backpack or in her duffel bag? But I don't know. It represented to me family, shared memories, people back home thinking of you. And even before I left, I'll show you another thing. I gave each of my children what we called Axel's parents.
oh,
And they got a bear, has my, dog tags, and they got a bear to think of while I was gone. Now, I have to tell you, my children were in college when I deployed. So it's not like they were little kids, but in a
right.
way, I've often said it's harder on older children because they know what's going on and they know the dangers. So
Sure.
they each got a bear to think about my time away. So Axel, what he came to represent to me, if you look at him, when he went over, he had nothing but his uniform.
Sure.
But as I met people, and the military, they would give little pins, a little token. So he came, he went over there representing my family back home. But when he came back with me, I have all of these little pins on him from people I had met, from the embassy events I had gone to. I was, as you mentioned, I received a Purple Heart when I was in the triage unit. They came to me and presented a combat action badge. So I even put this on Axel, because don't wear them when you're in theater. And then I was presented a Purple Heart. You can see I put that on Axel.
Oh, I
So
do.
he's come to represent to me, and I still keep him around, my tour of duty in Iraq. As silly as it may seem for a colonel and a general, to carry around a stuffed bear, I think it shows that we're all human, that we all need connections back to family. And we need connections to our experience in Iraq and to the people we met. I have several that are so important to me. I worked with a Australian diplomat, and of course, she gave me a kangaroo that's on here. Each one has meaning, and it just means so much now that we're back here that I can look at this every now and then and think of the people I met in Iraq. And, such a transformative experience to be in a combat zone for 15 to 18 months. So Axel means that to me. But on my way over, and I would take pictures of Axel in different settings in Iraq. Axel at the Saddam Hussein Palace, Axel with the camels, Axel as we were preparing to leave. My thought was always to write a children's book about Axel in a combat zone, Axel's tour, much
Wow.
like Flat Stanley.
I was just
Remember the
gonna
Flat
say that. It
Stanleys?
reminds me of
Yes.
Flat Stanley.
That's
great.
exactly what I thought of, and I would send everybody pictures back. Okay, Axel's out at the palace today. Axel's at the firing range. It was a little bit more fun than saying this is what I did.
Right.
Axel's in a chopper. We're heading out.
Yeah.
So I think it was a way for the family to relate to what I was doing that was somewhat lighthearted and not as heavy as it could have been. And especially if I had younger children, I think it really would have made a difference. However, my college age kids, loved it. So there you go. That's Axel. That's what I think of as a tactical treasure. Right. And I think we all have them, that memories of our families at home and memories of the friends we left behind as we've moved throughout our career. So I'm going to set Axel down now, but I think you've got some pictures of him traveling about. But that is my tactical treasure and great. What he means to me. And the reason we called him Axel is because he was found on the road and he was run over by tires.
Well, that's a very appropriate name for Axel. I love it.
So the simplest things can mean so much.
So now where does Axel hang out today? Does he still go with you or?
No, I haven't taken Axel on any more trips. He sits on my chair in my bedroom.
Okay.
I see him every morning and it reminds you of family shared events, folks that mean so much to you but are no longer with you.
Yeah.
All lost someone in combat zone. So it represents so much. So he's just my friend that hangs out.
I think that's a very special, appropriate treasure. I love the story. It's really, really great. So, and I think you said it well. My next question was going to be, what would you like the veteran and military community to take away from your heartwarming story of Axel? But I think you explained it well, just that, memories are important, family's important, and people you meet along the way are very important. So I think you said it well. Would you
Tracy,
like to add anything?
I think you hit it. Well, my father, when we had our first children, my husband and I have been married 39 years, and we have 3 children, all millennials now. But when we had very young children, my father said to me, he said, I had taken them to a museum or something, and he said, Carol, your job is to make memories for these children. It's memories that will give them strength, as they face tough times. And so, I think Axel was just one silly way to kind of capture memories. And I do think that's our job as parents. The same thing with our road orphans on the van. It's a way for the kids to remember what we've done as a family.
Yeah, so true. Very important. So you kind of alluded to the fact that you're working on a children's book. Are you thinking about that? Is it actually in the stages? I'm excited to hear.
Well, I've taken so many pictures back, when I deployed, our phones had cameras, so it was easy to take pictures where you were. And so I took pictures of Axel throughout my tour. And that was always my intent, I want to write a children's book about this. And then, of course, you got very busy, but I still have that. And it still could be something that I do, when I retire, to help children of deployed parents or even deployed family members kind of see what goes on in a very lighthearted way, that isn't threatening. And, here's what your loved one's doing while they're not at home.
Right.
So yes, I would say that's still in the works, Tracy. Yeah. You just might see Axel's adventures.
Yeah, I love it. And I it's funny that you just alluded to, children of the military, because that's exactly what I thought of as you were talking about it. That would be a perfect book to introduce to children who are in the military community. It would help them to understand where their parents are, what they're doing in a lighthearted way that's not scary.
Yes. All right, you've convinced me. It's on my to-do list, Tracy. Thank you for emphasizing that.
I love it. So before we go, where can people find you?
Oh my gosh. Well, you can search it on the web. But please, I have no problem with reaching out to me personally. I am committed to the military community. So it's Carol_Eggert at Comcast.com.
Okay.
As the Senior Vice President of Military Affairs, I see that as my job to support the military community. So no problem there. I'm also on LinkedIn. As I said, a simple search will bring up all sorts of things. I think we monitor that. I think folks on my team monitor it, make sure there's nothing detrimental on my social media profile. I think we're good. I don't think I've done anything that I would need to be worried about, but I would love to, answer any questions that come up. And also just look at Comcast. We are committed to hiring military talent. So look at our talent pages, military hiring at Comcast, and you'll see the jobs that we have open.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, it has been an absolute honor speaking with you today, Carol. Thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing Axel with us. And I am looking forward to hearing about that book, more about that, and I'll keep my eyes
Great.
open for that. And
Great.
thank you so much for your time. It was great
And I
speaking
would
with
say
you.
to you, Tracy, thank you for what you're doing. I think you're lessening the civ-mil divide in such a fun, interesting, engaging way. So thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. I love what I do every day. Love it.
All right.
Take
This is a
care.
real honor. All right.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Carol.